Hello, everybody. I'm Kim Scott.
And I'm Wesley Faulkner, Kim's co host.
And today with us, we are lucky to have Dr. Tina Opie, who I love. She is an associate professor of management, an award winning teacher and researcher, consultant, and speaker. She is the founder of Opie Consulting Group, LLC, where she advises large firms in the financial services, entertainment, media, beauty, educational, and healthcare industries. Her research has appeared in such outlets as O Magazine, The Washington Post, The Boston Globe, Harvard Business Review, and she has been published in multiple academic journals. She is also a regular commentator on Harvard Business Review's Women at Work podcast and Greater Boston's NPR affiliate television station, WGBH. And she and I recently did a talk together at Inbound. Tina, it's great to have you here.
Kim and Wesley, it is wonderful to be here with you all. It really is. I'm so excited.
We're going to have a good time. So I think we should talk about how you and I met before we jump into the reading. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Because I was talking about just work, which we are going to start calling radical respect every time now. Mm-hmm. And I think that I was not clear enough, even in that book, which was a response to my not having been clear enough in Radical Candor about the different intersections and who it is easier and who it is harder for. And you gave me some feedback that was very helpful, and we became friends.
We did. I mean,
thanks to the critical feedback. So thank you, Tina.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I think I remember, I want the audience to recognize that even though I'm an author, Kim's an author, Wesley is an author and accomplished, I'm sure, in many different ways, whenever you have that thought bubble, like, dang, do I say something or not? Because when we were talking, and what I've said, Kim and I have talked about this before, and we were talking a little bit before we started the podcast, there's general advice that sounds like common sense, but we've put a lot of research and effort into studying it. But then sometimes we have these phrases that we say, just stand up. Well, sometimes if you stand up, you get your head cut off.
Yeah.
You get fired. And so it's, as you mentioned, it's important to take an intersectional lens. And I know that some people may not agree with that word or disagree. All it means is that no one category means the same thing for all people. So being a woman, being a woman. So we say we're all women, but if you're a white woman and I'm a Black woman, or this person is a trans woman, it means different things depending upon what Kimberly Crenshaw and others, the Combahee River Collective, they talked about this, intersecting kinds of oppression.
Yeah.
And that affects the way that you experience that category. So that's why when people say the word women, people, when they've done research, a picture of a white woman comes to mind. If they say men, a white man. If they say gay men, a white gay man comes to mind. So there are these prototypes, and this is in fact connected to some of what you talk about when you get into bullying and prejudice and stereotyping and bias. Those things are sort of interconnected in the way that we think about each other. And so when you and I first met, I had to decide if I was going to say anything when I had that first bubble. And I was like, well, in the spirit of radical candor, I am going to share privately. And I do think we can even get into the way that I did that. I chose not to on a public forum. We were on, I don't know if we can say the name of where we were.
Clubhouse, I think.
Yeah.
We can say that.
So we were on Clubhouse during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I chose not to say it in front of the room of all those people.
Yeah.
I reached out privately. I mean, I might have said something publicly in the room, but then got into more detail later. And I think that's also connected to radical candor, because I care about you as an individual. And so I didn't want in any way for that to feel, threatening.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I wish that we had met sooner, because one of the things you said to me is you really should have co-authored this book with someone. You shouldn't have tried to write
Yeah,
this book alone.
that's right.
And you were right about that. I wish I hadn't tried to write it alone, because like as a white woman, I was like, I felt on the one hand I had no standing to write this book. I didn't
Yeah,
have the right to write this book. And I also felt at the same time I had a greater obligation to write the
to
book.
write the
And like
book.
that could lead that I think that sort of tension made itself felt in the book.
Yeah, I mean, well, I wrote Shared Sisterhood with my
Yes.
co-author, and the idea for Shared Sisterhood is like 15 years old. But when I have a white paper that's really old. I didn't write the book though until I had a white woman who I
Yeah.
could trust. Because I tried to write it by myself, and I was like, "Girl, you cannot write a book about sisterhood by yourself. It just doesn't make sense. You need to have a sister
Yeah.
that you can write with, and that
Yeah.
had to be someone who I trusted, someone who was also theoretically and research minded, and that was Beth, someone who I've gotten to know over the decades, and we're friends. You don't have to be a friend to co-author, but we happen to be.
It helps for sure.
Well, it does because people see us and they think that we're disagreement free. That is not true.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have good conflict. We have conflict. We don't tend to have relational conflict. We have task conflict.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out how do we accomplish this goal or pursue this task most effectively. And because we have very different backgrounds, we may have different perspectives on how to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have to, work through those things. And I think that leads to a stronger book.
Yeah. I love that. I really love that. All right, we can talk. I could talk to you all day, but should we jump into the reading and you can give
Sure.
me some more radical candor? All right, here I go. I'm going to do the reading. This is from the Prejudice section. Prejudice, how leaders can prevent it from ruining respect. What if the issue isn't unconscious bias, but a very consciously held prejudice reflecting a stereotype you believe is inaccurate and unfair, and that people on your team find offensive? What can you as a leader do about that? The first thing to do is manage your own emotions. Prejudice can induce a strong response: incredulity, disgust, rage, impatience, avoidance. Take a deep breath. You can't control what the people who work for you think.
Mhm.
But on your team, you are free. I'm going to start over. People on your team are free to believe whatever they want, but they are not free to impose their beliefs on others. Your job is to work with your team to identify and articulate where that line is. What is okay to say and do at work, and what is not. The trouble comes when you're the one charged with deciding when the murky line between freedom to and freedom from has been crossed.
Mhm.
This is one of the toughest challenges you'll face as a leader. It's a leader's job to create an environment where people can work with one another productively. Prejudice, a belief that some sort of false stereotype is actually the truth, is inherently disrespectful. It gets in the way of the team's ability to collaborate, to honor one another's individuality, to communicate across differences. Pointing out a prejudice probably isn't going to change it. When leaders teach their teams to hold up a mirror to a person's bias, they typically self correct. But in the case of prejudice, if you hold up a mirror, the person is likely to say, "Yeah, that's me. Aren't I good looking?" The person with the prejudiced belief doesn't acknowledge the prejudice. Rather, they think it's the truth. What then can a leader do when one person's prejudiced belief gets in the way of their ability to respect others on the team or even creates a hostile work environment? I don't have the answer to this question, but there's one thing you can do to improve your odds of arriving at a good outcome: create a space for conversation. When you spend a little time with your team talking about what is okay to say or do and not okay to say or do on your team, you'll build an important conflict resolution muscle. You don't have to come up with a rationale that would satisfy a philosopher in order to figure out how to work better together. there are resources out there that can help. You can hire someone with experience to guide you through the conversation, or turn to some of the articles mentioned in the end notes. All right, I'll stop there. Lay it on me. What do you all think?
Wesley, you can go first.
I was thinking about the harm reduction in terms of people who want to express themselves, but when you're thinking about being the referee between freedom from and freedom to,
Yeah.
that there needs to be a real feeling of respect and also a feeling of regret when harm is caused.
Yeah.
I was thinking about when my son was just a little over 1 years old, just learning how to walk, and he would do this thing where he would just barely get up, and then
Yeah.
he'll walk towards me and then trip over my big feet and then fall to the ground and then give
Uh-huh.
me a look of horror and disgust.
Like, how
As
could you have done that to me?
Yeah.
yes, like I was the one that tripped him, and some people react with, I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And but what you should do is have care and concern. And I think that's the same when if someone's coming to work wearing, let's say, a Trump shirt, and someone else is offended by it, then you have to understand, like, is me wearing this shirt as important as the harm I'm doing to someone else who
Yeah.
reacts? And if you're like, I don't care about that other person, that really makes it solidified in your choice. But if you're like, you know what, I really support this person, but I see it's hurting someone else that I work with, so I can choose not to wear it, because then you don't need a referee in that point. Because when someone says I'm harmed, they're like, okay, I understand, or I don't understand, but I don't want to cause harm. And so I think that is the balance thing, that if people really don't care about how other people feel, F your feelings kind of a thing, then that makes that conversation so much more difficult.
So much more difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree with that, Wesley. And my mind is going into where are the boundaries of that. So what if I have on a good time shirt, or a shirt where there's a person with an afro? Or what if I'm combing my hair with a black power fist and someone says that's offensive to me? It really is interesting to start thinking through what are the gradations when it comes to someone else is offended. I have offended people by walking into the room. And so I think sometimes what would you all, what would you say to that? How do we, my very presence, or the notion that there is something that is a different, somebody might have a different value system than what someone else does, isn't it itself offensive? How do we respond to that? I know that's a little bit tangential, but I think it's important, because in this increasingly polarized world, we may objectively, I'm stirring my tea with this spoon. This is an objective spoon, but for someone else, if it's offensive, what do we do then? And I
Yeah.
hope
And
I'm
that
not
was
thinking-
interesting. You turned it around. It's very different on one side than the other, the spoon.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. So I think I was working with one leader who was struggling with this, and I'll just describe where this leader drew the line for her team, and you can tell me what you all think. What this leader said is, and this was in 2016, and this leader said that people were not allowed to wear MAGA hats or Trump paraphernalia,
mhm,
or Biden, either one. Like, no political, but they were allowed to wear Black Lives Matter, because Black Lives Matter was a human. And this leader explained it to me. Black Lives Matter is a humanitarian movement, and we're
mhm.
all for that. But I don't want political speech emblazoned on people's clothing at work.
I see.
Um, and like, I happen to think that was a good. I happen to agree with that. I don't know what you all think, but
I
whether
do.
you, what to me, the even more important than the decision, was that it was clear to
Okay.
people. Like, so I'll throw out another totally different example, and maybe you all will wish I hadn't. But like, I would never go to work for Hobby Lobby. I
Mhm.
just wouldn't do it. But they have their policy. They made it clear. And so now I know not to go to work there. And so I would rather that if that is the policy, I'd rather it be explicit. Like they drew the line. They said, this is our belief. And we think that, you're imposing your belief on us. If I'm going to present my point of view, if you if you act out your human rights,
Yeah.
but but whatever, like I can abide by this, I disagree with the Supreme Court ruling, but I can abide by it. At least we
Right.
know where the line is for Hobby Lobby and where the line is for my friend, and they're drawn in different places.
What
Yeah.
if an all lives matter shirt would or paraphernalia would that be allowed in the
No,
same
because All Lives
business?
Matter is not a human rights movement. It is a denial of Black Lives Matter. I
But
mean,
Okay,
see,
so it's
don't you think that some people would think that that is a political argument?
yes, they would, but you know what? Like the leader made it clear.
No,
So
and listen, I happen to agree. I
mhm.
yeah,
happen to agree, but I really do think it's important for us as leaders and people who are helping organizations design their cultures to have these conversations because you
yes,
best
Yeah.
believe,
yeah.
especially given that we're about to have a presidential election, a
There's at
lot of
least
things are
yes,
going to proliferate and emerge and surface or resurface. And
yeah,
so it's important that's why I wanted to ask that specific question. And that's something that I do like about that excerpt in the book in general is that you're very good at parsing, at detailing, this is bullying, this is prejudice, this is
hmm,
bias,
Mhm.
this is discrimination. I think it's important, whether or not we agree with your definitions,
yes,
they're clear. No,
yeah,
really. And I think when we enter into a conversation, that's one of the first things we have to do is let's set the table and define the key terms that we're using. Because sometimes it's impossible for people to just work because they're speaking a different language.
yes,
So I really like that about that excerpt as well as your book is that you're very clear. I mean, you're like prejudice is meaning it.
yeah.
Um, and anyway, I have all kinds of thoughts because and I can share my story as well. But um, anyway, I will stop rambling. We could talk all day.
Mhm.
We could,
I,
and I
I,
would like to, but I want to know, Wesley. I cannot read your expression, but I'm dying to know what you're thinking.
I- as a person who his job is, I'm a senior community manager. So in terms of policy, it's not whether you do the right thing or the wrong, or I mean, doing the right thing is of course is something you want to
Yeah,
do,
it's important.
but you also it's extremely important how you do it.
Yeah.
And there is an inherent resistance to some top down um,
Mm,
like things that are pushed that might feel oppressive to some people. So it's important to really not only feel like people have the opportunity to have a dialogue in the decision
Yes.
making process, but also that that when it's disseminated, it is explained in the verbosity that is needed to make sure that you're covering the nuance that is needed.
hmm
I was just in a meeting today, and we were trying to solve an issue, and someone would start off an answer as in "let's just," and then say something, and there aren't really simple solutions for complex problems,
No.
Right.
and making sure that there is enough wiggle room, and but that being very defiant and being very authoritarian sometimes just gets rejected, especially in the culture of this country. So
hmm
it's important. Like I said, it's important to do the right thing, but it's important to deploy it and do it in a way that people still feel heard, even if you're doing something that they might disagree with.
100%. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I said like the first step is to create space for conversation.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you can't dictate this where the line is as the leader. You've got to get your team to let you know where they think it is, and you've got to help them have this hard conversation about where they think it is, and then you're going to come up collectively with an answer that is going to that some people are going to disagree with. I mean, there's no way you can
Right.
define this and please everyone on a team, I don't think. Uh,
Yeah. What I
um,
was chiming in because my dissertation advisor, Dr. Elizabeth Morrison at NYU, the Stern School of Business, she does a lot of research on what you are on voice. Voice is about making sure that your employees feel heard.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is when you allow people to have voice, even if you don't end up implementing the ideas that they suggest, they are more likely to they're likely to have higher satisfaction with the outcomes than if you don't listen to them, if you silence them, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
And that's really what's interesting to me is when I think about the juxtaposition of cultures that encourage voice versus cultures that sort of demand silence
Yeah.
or instill silence. It's drastic when I think about these conversations. You can imagine in a culture where they encourage silence, maybe not intentionally, but that's the outcome. People just don't say anything. Okay, as a leader, I read this Just Workbook, and now I want you all to tell me what you think. That's not going to happen. And
No.
so I think it's really important. What I see as a necessary preamble to Just Work is that the leader does an accurate assessment of themselves, their leadership style, and their culture. Because Just Work is something that's going to help in your culture, but if it will feel inauthentic if it's such a drastic change or departure from where you have been before.
100%. Yeah. If you want to listen, challenge, commit, if you want to get to commitment, you've got to listen, you've got to invite challenge and be willing to challenge back. And then you can move forward. But if you skip listen and challenge, you'll never get commitment.
Exactly. And I just want to make sure I just got a message. I know this is a technical thing that it was having difficulty with my audio. Am I okay?
You sound great.
Okay, good.
All right. So Wesley, one last thought on the reading and then let's hear Tina's story.
My last thought is just that people want to be ethical and they say that
Yeah.
they want to do the right thing. But just remember that when someone says they're acting ethically, that ethic is not something that is standardized. And so
No.
there's
Yeah.
many rubrics of being ethical. And so that saying that in itself is not an excuse or permission to do the thing that you think is right.
100%. Really important.
That's a very good point. And that's reminding me of, we also have to be careful of ethical relativism.
Yes.
Where people are like, well, but I was in this context and everybody was stealing, and so that's what I did.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not so much, but I really like how you all are both being very nuanced in the discussion points that you're raising. And man, I miss this. I really do. I wish that there were more public forums like this to have this nuanced kind of conversation. I mean, where in fact, Kim, you're inviting constructive criticism of your work, for example. That's how we met. I really wish, and you all are both doing a lot to create those kinds of communities, but it's very refreshing to actually participate in it.
Well,
And
thank
that's
you.
not brown nosing. I'm not trying to brown nose because if you know me, I'm very direct and blunt.
You are very direct.
Yeah, I'm very direct, but it's really nice. I do I work by myself a lot because I'm a writer and an entrepreneur. So I'm at home in this office by myself a lot. It's nice to come together with people who may be different than me, but we can have a forum around this. So I'm really excited and happy about that. Can't wait to tell my husband.
Yeah. That's why I do this podcast.
You said what? I know, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk. I want you to talk a little bit about your podcast with your husband at the end. But first, let's hear your story and then talk because I'm excited about your podcast. But let's hear your story.
Yeah. And we don't have. We did a podcast on. We'll talk about that later. We're not doing it now. But so my story is I graduated from college in 1993 from James Madison University, and my first job after undergrad was at Nations Bank, which is now Bank of America. And I went through, you go through a rotational program where you go to different divisions of the bank. And then it's not a bidding process, but people who have been exposed to you decide where they want to hire you. So I was hired. I was very happy. I was working right across from the White House.
Wow.
Yeah, literally sometimes the sharpshooters
Uh-huh.
would come into our building and go up the
Oh
elevators.
my
And
gosh.
I was on the elevator with them one time, like, oh my God, just nervous. But they do that to like before the
Yeah.
inauguration, because it
Yeah.
literally we would have events in our building to watch it. But anyway, so I landed in this group in Nations Bank, and I was the youngest person on the team initially. I was the youngest black person. There was an older black man who was very senior. He was like a dad to me, an uncle to me, and he was great. But there was a white man, an older white man. I mean, if I am 22, 23, 24, something like that, 25 years old, when I'm there, he was probably in his 40s or 50s. He looked older maybe than he actually was.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember that part of my job, and I'm young, I used to wear glasses so I would look older. Because
Uh-huh.
I had worn contact lenses before then, but I intentionally wore my glasses then to look
Look
older.
older. Right.
I would wear my business suits. I wouldn't go in
Yeah.
business casual for the most part. So one of my responsibilities was prospecting. So I had to meet new clients. And we worked in nonprofits. And in Washington, D.C., where I was, nonprofits are huge. So I had gotten inroads into a big client. Well, we report out who our prospects are. This white man went to my boss, who was a white woman, and said, I have gotten feedback from this prospect that Tina is not doing a good job. And I think that, either I need to shadow her or replace her. He wanted the relationship.
Yeah.
So fortunately, we'll call my manager E, and that is the first initial of her name. She called me into her office and she said, Tina, I want to let you know what has happened. Now, because you have worked with other people, I asked around and found out that that was not true. I do have some feedback for some things you can improve upon, but I want you to know that I'm supporting you. So, in this story, to me,
Wow.
it demonstrates two kinds of behaviors, sort of an upstander. I mean, she went above and beyond the call of duty by actually interviewing other people who had worked with me
Yeah.
to figure out if she could corroborate that story. But I think um, I probably violated stereotypes when I went to Nations Bank, because I have never really, I've been called strident, for example, because I think as a woman and as a black woman, some people expect me to cower but I
Yeah.
have never been that since
No.
ever,
Yeah.
ever.
Good.
And
That's why you've
so
been successful.
yeah, but sometimes I think what it does is it violates the stereotype, because
Yeah.
I don't think that I'm incompetent. And banking is a quantitative field, but I'm like,
Yeah.
no, because I will stay until 2 a.m. to make sure I know the numbers. I
Yeah.
think that offended people,
Yeah.
and they thought that I would be an easy mark.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I hope that story was helpful.
Thank you. I'm sorry that that happened, first of all, and thank you for telling the story. And yeah, I mean, my guess is that that older white man thought that he thought you were weak
Hmm.
and vulnerable, and he thought he could get away with it.
Yeah.
He thought he could get away with taking your client, and he could not, thanks to you being competent and your boss standing up for your competence.
Yeah, and I will tell you, as a result of that experience, so I do this one thing where I tell my students or clients that it's critical that you not have a siloed reputation.
Yes.
Meaning, if you're working in this division, that's great, but you need to go outside of the division.
Yeah.
And those people also need to have a sense of who you are. So, now it's like, I don't curse. So if someone says, oh my gosh, Tina Opie is so incompetent, she cursed me out, everybody's going to say,
No, she
what?
didn't.
Yeah, exactly. They're gonna say that does not sound like Tina. You need to build your own reputation, and that is what to sort of fortify yourself against prejudice or bullying. And to me, well, it wasn't bullying because he didn't do it directly to me, but it was
I
a
think it was bullying.
yeah,
He was trying to take your
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
You know?
and I think prejudice was wrapped up in there, because I don't
Yeah.
think it's a coincidence that he targeted the young black woman.
Not a coincidence. No,
Yeah.
impossible to believe that that
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
coincidence.
When I heard your story, of course, I was thinking about my own history. And so tell me if this sounds like it could be the case. I've been in places where I felt confident and
Mm-hmm.
where most of the time I was actually right about some things. When I worked, I used to work for Dell in tech support.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually a sales support rep. So when someone's selling a new combination, they might say, "Will this printer work with this scanner, with this computer, or whatever?" And my manager at the time was someone who was just relatively new to the department and wasn't extremely technical. And she would say something. I would correct her. I will just point out that I probably maybe did not do it in the best way every single time, but I was usually right. But I also felt like she would just try to say that I was wrong, and a lot of times because she wanted to like take me down a peg.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She thought that maybe I was too confident or I was too um, too secure in me being myself, and I
Yeah.
needed to be more on edge and kind of like more of a shrinking violet in their presence to make sure I didn't take up too much room. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think that did that seem like the case, that the person felt that you were too good at your job, or was it the person that felt like they would just be believed because the story would be plausible just because of the way that you looked?
I honestly, Wesley, I'll be honest with you. I felt it was he wanted what I had. There was he because I got the Rookie of the Year award, for example. So I was doing well, and I don't know if he was trying to. Dr. Caretha Mitchell has this research called Know Your Place aggression, which is how if people perceive that you're claiming space to which you're not entitled, they will engage in behaviors to remind you of your proper place. So that to me could be what he was doing. Um, and it could also be the inverse, which is it's not him telling me I have to know my place. He feels entitled
Yeah.
to whatever I
He
have.
wants.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever is something that well, no, too bad. I mean, as a white man, this person, if he was senior to me, he had been in banking much longer, and who is this whippersnapper coming in here, taking getting inroads into this big prospect? So probably I don't know, but I do know that I have had people who tried to teach me what my place is. But that doesn't it's funny because sometimes it's almost hard for me to process it that way because I never think of myself as beneath. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like I can see what they're trying to do, but it's almost funny because I'm like, okay. It's like when we're negotiating, I love when people assume that I'm incompetent.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is fabulous because that usually means I'm going to clean your clock and your mama's clock
Yeah.
because you're not going to come prepared if the stereotype is that a black person, a black woman is incompetent, not good at numbers, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't mean this to sound arrogant. Some people may hear this and think that I'm.
No, this is confidence, not
Yeah, it
arrogance.
is. It's confidence. But I will tell you that when I've been told, and I actually posted about this. This is by a powerful white man in a meeting, and I think he meant it as a compliment, or maybe not. I did a poll. He said that I'm a male female.
That I hate that. I was told by an employee, and he said this to the whole company. I had started this company, and and this guy who worked on the engineering team, this engineer, and I know he was not trying to take me down a peg, but he stood up and he said, "Nobody at this company has bigger balls than Kim," and I'm like, "Oh, come on."
Ovaries. First of all, ovaries. Because I'm like, testicles are very sensitive.
Yeah, ovaries are tough.
You could not squeeze a baby out of a penis or a testicle. You would implode.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's probably too
All right,
much
Wesley,
information.
we're now we need this shared siblinghood.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
This is not your fault, Wesley, that this guy said this.
Yeah, that
Oh
was
no, I don't.
insane.
Yes, no, no.
Yeah, no,
Hashtag not all men.
but exactly definitely not all men, and anyone can be a sister regardless of gender. It's an intentional flip of the word. But
Yes.
yeah, so that male female or no one has bigger balls than Kim.
Yeah.
It's so in because that's based on stereotypes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
based on stereotypical
It's
expectations.
I think Wesley is drawing a really interesting distinction that I hadn't thought about, and this may be because of my own lived experience. But I immediately assumed in your story, Tina, that he thought you were weak and that's why he did it, not because he thought you shouldn't be strong. And
Yeah.
I think as a white woman, I've been perceived as vulnerable,
Hmm.
but it's not, I think, well, that's not really true. I mean, like there was one time when I was working with an engineering team and I had done some analysis, and that my engineering counterpart said, "Oh, you're doing." I was on the operations team, and the engineering lead said, "Oh, you're doing ops math again." And it was like partly an anti-ops bias and partly a gender bias because ops had a lot more women in it than
Yeah.
engineering. So so it does happen that he didn't like the fact, and my analysis I think was very good.
Yeah.
I think he said that because it impressed him, not because I think it was, what did you call it? The
Know your place aggression.
yes, I think
Dr. Karetha
that was
Mitchell.
yeah.
What's interesting, because I did like the distinction that Wesley made as well. To me, what comes to mind is there in some scenarios, I think this person thought he could take advantage of me.
Yes.
And what Wesley said to me is he may or may not have thought that I deserved that
Yes.
prospect.
Yes,
So
exactly.
that's sort of to me, it's like,
Like parsing.
can yes, let's parse that apart. And so, the can they take advantage of me is the weakness, vulnerability. Do I deserve that? Might mean in his mind, I'm attaining or about to attain a level of status that he doesn't think I deserve. I
Yeah.
should not ascend that high in the status hierarchy. And if I
Yeah.
am successful in getting this prospect, who knows what they might think of her?
Yes.
And I don't know which one it was. I think I potentially thought it was the former,
Mm-hmm.
taking advantage. But I do think Wesley raises a good point, which
Yeah.
is he also could have been like, "Girl, you don't deserve this,"
Yeah.
which is so funny because I'm like, "How didn't I get it?"
Yeah. Yes. Deserve is such an interesting concept, isn't it? And not really a helpful one usually. I had a
Yeah,
mentor who said to me, God help us if we get what we deserve.
exactly.
I
I say
think,
that all. I mean, because thank God for grace.
yes,
I'm a Christian person, and grace is unmerited favor. It's sort of like God or someone could jack you up, but they
yeah,
choose not to.
yeah.
Because what you deserve is to get jacked up. But I'm gonna instead have a conversation with you, lovingly talk to you. And
Yeah,
man, did I learn that a lot getting married and having children
yeah,
and
yes,
taking
yeah,
care of my elderly, my older parents. That
yeah,
there's a lot of anyway. Yeah, deserve is a
Yeah.
is a really weird word.
yes.
Can I point out another thing in your story that you kind of went past, and I
Sure.
just wanted to also like circle back and double click on is that you mentioned as a word of advice to make sure that you have other people outside your department that can vouch for you or can kind of verify your reputation. And I don't know if that plan A, B, C, D, all these contingencies is something that people think about, at least naturally, especially if they don't see themselves as being vulnerable or
Hmm.
possibly someone conspiring against them. And that's something that when I started in tech, I thought, I just will get by on my merit. If I do well, I work hard, I will be able to get far. And then it took me a while to realize like the reality as opposed to the dream that was sold about how things are. And I had to start saying, well, of course this person's lying, so of course nothing bad's going to happen to me, and how that string of thinking doesn't always work, and how that you have to, in some people or some places, make sure that you have this contingency plan. What happens if, for instance, in your situation, that there was no contingency plan. There
Mhm.
were no other people that your manager can verify with. Or what if your manager didn't do the due diligence? Then you could have been a person that's vulnerable. But I also wanted to ask, was there any consequences for that
Yes,
act
I had
of
the same
someone
question.
spreading the
Consequences to
falsehood?
me,
For him,
The person, the
for the guy
man.
for lying.
I don't know. I didn't ask. I think when I got called into E's office, I was flabbergasted. And I was a little nervous about
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
And then because she didn't tell me right away, we talked. We had multiple conversations, but I didn't even ask. But he wasn't fired; he was still there.
Did he, I
I just
wonder?
know that I avoided him after
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
didn't trust him.
Yeah.
If new people, not that I was trying to blackball him, but I would, if somebody was new coming, I would say just watch your back with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the scary thing, is that if there's no consequences, they'd be like, oh, that's blah, blah, blah. He'll do that. Watch out for him.
Yeah,
Instead
that's like
of,
the crap. Boys will be boys. I'm like,
yeah,
that's
exactly.
rape culture.
Yes. And it's more like the more effort is put into protecting yourself, and maybe helping protect other people than there is for the person who is the cause of some of this harm, being
The
worried for
perpetrator.
their future
Yeah,
and
that's
what's
that's
going
why
to
there
happen to
have to
them.
be consequences for bullying. Because if he didn't get any consequences, he's going to go do that to someone else, and maybe to you again.
Yeah,
Unless
and
you.
I always wrestle with, in many organizations, HR will say, well, we can't share what happened to the person because of privacy. I almost feel like if a perpetrator enacted something against me, I should be allowed to know
Yes.
as
What
part of
happened?
this, what happened.
Yeah.
You don't have to give me the details, but you can say, I mean, like all the details, but you can say it affected X, maybe this in this large category.
Yeah.
And we also want you to know blah, blah, blah. Because it, in restorative justice, right, you always want to be made whole.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's a lack of closure because you don't know what happens. And
Yeah.
you don't know if your supervisor, your manager, or the leader took you seriously, if this person's going to do it to you again, if they're going to
Yeah.
do it to someone else. And so, as Wesley says, we spend a lot of cognitive energy, emotional labor protecting ourselves. And I have wondered, I talk about this, Beth and I have this experience. I don't know if you all have ever had the experience of where you're talking to someone and it feels like you're talking soul to soul.
Uh-huh.
So you're sort of surpassing the visible veil.
Yes.
It's not. I'm not talking to a white woman or a black. I mean, we are. So please don't understand. I'm very proud of being a black woman.
Yeah.
That's not the point. But we've been able to transcend almost in that moment. And when the points you were raising, Wesley, reminds us, it makes you feel like you're tethered to your identity and to yourself
Yeah.
in such a way where you don't have as much liberation or freedom as you'd like, because that's the only thing that people are seeing about you, which is why prejudice and bullying and bias and
Yeah.
discrimination are so antithetical to what we want in our organizations and in our cultures.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, right on.
And I think also if it's sort of BS to say for privacy reasons we can't tell you because you know what happened. It happened to you. Like what and they know what they did to you. So why don't you get to know what happened to them? I don't
Exactly.
know.
And it is because I'm like, whose rights are you protecting?
Yeah,
It's,
I mean,
it's
maybe if it hurt his rating, then they could say it hurt his rating. They don't have to tell you what rating
that
they
it was
got.
a one. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So
yeah,
he's going to, this is going to affect his annual evaluation
yeah,
or something. But anyway,
exactly. All right. Well, why don't you? I think we're just about at time. Although I would love to talk to you all day long. Tell us a little bit about your podcast with your husband.
well, so I don't know which podcast you're talking
The
about.
one about staying married.
Oh, yeah. So
I
what
love
was
that
hilarious,
one.
we were doing some, can I say that? We were doing Facebook Lives. My husband and
Okay.
I, we've been married for 23 years. We met in 1996, 1997, and then we got married in 2000. And we're a Christian couple. And there are some things that, it's probably very not mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
especially for a secular society. But what's interesting is people see us, my husband and I together, and they're like, you all really like each other. Like you really,
It's true.
yeah,
It's
there's an
true.
energy. I mean, I felt that energy when I met them. I mean, he's fine, first of all, but his mind is beautiful. And
Yeah.
I don't mean a beautiful mind like the movie.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, hey, look, neurodivergent. I'm neurodivergent, but
He's a literary beautiful mind.
yeah, he literally. I mean, it's like he's very smart and bright and curious. He's also sexy, and he's a great dad, and he's a good, so all those things. So we were doing these. People would ask us, what are the secrets? And I felt like people wanted us to say things like, leave gifts for each other, or
Yeah.
give each other massages. And I'm like, look, we did this podcast and it was literally almost a day in the life. And we would work through conflict. We would talk about how we had worked through conflict. We would talk about what we thought were some of the key elements of success, like finance,
Mm-hmm.
parents, parenting,
Yeah.
sex,
Yeah.
career outlook, religion. I mean, like one of the things I said is, and this may be surprising to people, I really want a Christian man, because of my beliefs.
Yeah.
Anyone else can marry who they want to,
Yeah.
but I want a man who can pray for me.
Yeah.
And so we talked about those very personal things. We had thousands of people watching, but it ended. We got into an argument right before we were supposed to go live. And I got on screen and I said, well, Fred and I just had an argument. And he looked at me because between the two of us, I am much more effusive.
Yes.
And, I'm not as extroverted as people think, but I like to say I'm the waves that crash into the shore. He's the deep,
Right.
still water that's
The
far out.
water runs deep.
You don't sort of know what he's thinking, but he looked at me in that moment. That was our last show. He said, you told too much. I was like, Fred, how are we going to have a Facebook Live on authentic marriage and we can't share with the people when we get into a conflict? But some people I'm ready to address the conflict right away.
Yeah.
Some people need time to process it. So Kim, if we can figure out, we need to not do lives. I think what we need to do is pre-recording.
Yeah, and then if you
That's what I think we need to do.
Yeah.
But the Facebook Live, man, I'm telling you, I wish I should be. I don't know if I can find that Facebook Live. If I could find that footage, it was hilarious. If his head whipped to me, he said, "No, she did not." Just put my business out in the street. But anyway,
I was gonna say, if you're gonna go out, that is the note to go out.
That is the way to go out. Yeah, that's good.
We went out, but we had thousands of people tuning in. And so Kim, I'm so happy you brought that up, because we are now empty nesters, and we have
maybe that's what you all need to do with your empty nest
we have more bandwidth now, emotionally and cognitively.
Yeah.
To, I think, focus on something like that, because we there are a lot of people who are hurting in their relationships.
Yeah.
And it would be interesting to see what that might lead to.
I love that. All right. Well, thank you, Tina. Thank you, Wesley. Loved this conversation and wish it could have gone on for another 2 hours.
So thank you for joining us. If you would like to join us on the podcast, please email us at hello@justworktogether.com and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. And thank you for joining us, and see you next time. Goodbye.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.